Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We have a very special guest on the line today. My name is Akash Chogli. I am the Senior Advisor for Economic Policy Issues at Americans for Prosperity, and we are joined by our Ohio State Director, Donovan O'Neill. Donovan, I will let you introduce our very esteemed guest today.
Yeah, thank you, Akash. I think it's a representative from Ohio who needs no introduction, but I'm excited in this role to be able to welcome him to share a few thoughts with our activists. Congressman Jim Jordan, thanks for joining us today.
You bet, Tom. Thank you. Thanks for what you guys do.
Appreciate
Absolutely.
what you do there.
Congressman, so there's a ton going on. I think we'll dive right into it.
Sure.
Folks have heard a lot about the infrastructure debate, the reconciliation debate. I think right before we get to that stuff, another phrase they might be hearing a little bit about right now is this so-called debt ceiling. So before we get to the infrastructure conversation, can you just give us kind of a simplified explanation of what that is and what the conversation is, and how it might be an opportunity to inject some kind of spending reform into all this craziness taking place in Washington?
Yeah, I wish we could, but so far, typically what happens is they just raise the debt ceiling. I mean, our system requires that if you're going to go into greater debt, you have to approve a certain amount of that. Sometimes they just say, no, you can go for a certain amount of time and accumulate debt. Sometimes they give a dollar. We're going to be able to go, so much higher in our debt. But there has to be a vote. It has to actually pass the Congress in order to do that. The problem is, of course, we're approaching 30 trillion in debt. The Democrats are spending like crazy. We're at 40-year high in inflation because of the ridiculous spending. There was about 10 years ago. It's funny you bring it up because I was with Senator DeMint last night, and former Senator DeMint, and Jim and I were talking about 10 years ago. We had the first kind of big debt ceiling debate here in Congress that when Republicans were actually in the majority. And we had a plan that we had put together as conservatives called Cut, Cap, and Balance. And the idea was to cut a little spending in the current budget, cap spending as a percentage of our overall economy, which would be good. We don't want an ever-growing government. And then start the process to get to a balanced budget amendment in our Constitution, which would, we think, long-term be the real solution. Because, I always say everyone has to balance their budget. Every family, every business, every township, city, county, state, everyone has to balance their budget except the federal government. Oh, by the way, that's the one that, of course, has the $30 trillion debt. So this is serious. The debt service, just to service that debt now every year, that payment's getting bigger and bigger, and that's a scary thing. So it'd be nice if we could do some reform, but that's not where the Democrats are going to go. In the end, they're just going to approve the debt ceiling and allow more borrowing.
And it's certainly to your point, if they're going to raise the debt ceiling, as they should, to honor the faith and credit of the United States, we believe it should come with some kind of reform, right? You mentioned the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act. There's a number of proposals out there. We shouldn't just do this for the sake of doing it without any kind of reform to address this problem long term. But we're now in the context of another debate that would have enormous long-term ramifications, and that's two bills that combine for almost $5 trillion in spending. Now, Congressman, you've been in this fight with us for a long time in Americans for Prosperity. Can you just put into perspective, before we get into the details of these packages, the sheer size and scope of the cost of what we're talking about? How can we help folks understand just how much spending is on the table right now with these two packages?
Well, I mean, it's truly unprecedented. So just maybe by contrast, go back to when President Obama first came into office and he did the stimulus. That was like $750 billion. Well, we're not doing, and we were all like, oh, that's ridiculous. It's the biggest spending bill in history. We're now talking, as you mentioned, almost $5 trillion. So 6 times the size of the stimulus package that Obama put into law back in 2009 when he was first in office. So it seems to me the Democrats' economic plan, I mean, it's the dumbest economic plan I've ever seen, because it seems to me it's really 4 parts. It's lock down the economy, spend like crazy, pay people not to work, and then for everyone who is working, oh, by the way, we're going to raise your taxes. I mean, such a deal. But that's their economic plan. And you wonder why the numbers for President Biden, his poll numbers are dropping so much. Is because the American people have figured out, I have less purchasing power. The price of eggs, bread, milk, bacon, gas, everything is going up, lumber, you name it, everything is going up. And so when prices are going up, you have less purchasing power. And just a year ago, under President Trump, it was just the opposite. So That's what Americans are seeing, and it's I think it's hopefully why you're seeing the Democrats not be able to get together on this 1.2 and this $3.5 trillion packages and figure out how they're going to move forward, is because they're getting so much pushback from the American people who figured out the economic plan of the Democrats is bad news for them and their family, and obviously for our country.
Congressman Jordan, you mentioned this. We had a day of action this past week, and when we were raising awareness, pulling our activists out across the Buckeye State to spread the word and let folks know that we need to stop the spending spree. I think about a conversation I had with Phil over there in Steubenville in Jefferson County, Ohio. Phil and he kind of summed up the sentiments of the folks that we had congregated there in Steubenville. As like, they support hard infrastructure, right? They know we need roads,
sure,
but you look at 4.7 trillion or $5 trillion, and they're like, the devil's got to be in the details there, right? Like, that's not all just going to hard infrastructure. Can you unpack a little bit of the devil in the details there? Is Phil's
great question.
Correct?
Yeah, great question and good insight, because you're exactly right. The vast majority of this spending is not for what we would traditionally define as infrastructure. In fact, we had a markup a week ago Monday where Chairman Nader on the Judiciary Committee said that amnesty for people who broke the law to come here, he called that human infrastructure. So again, when you're calling that amnesty, you're making that into infrastructure. I think that proves Phil's point and confirms his hunch. But so much of this is Green New Deal stuff. This is special tax credits for industries that are picked by the left as the favorite industries. If you remember, I always say the Green New Deal is really no different than the loan guarantee program at the Department of Energy 10 years ago that Obama rolled out. The only difference is it's just 1,000 times bigger, the Green New Deal. But remember that loan guarantee program, it gave your tax dollars to Solyndra, Beacon Power, Abound Solar, all these companies, like 20 some of these companies that had like a credit rating of BB-, they all went bankrupt. That's what we see now. And those same kind of things are in this legislation, along with the tax increases. You know, the Joint Committee on Taxation said for families, all the different things they want to do on taxes, it would hit families as low as $30,000 in annual income. So when this idea that it's only going to be for people making $400,000 a year, as President Biden promised, is just not accurate according to the Joint Committee on Taxation. So those are the kind of things in this bill. It's why it's such a bad package. It is not going to help our economy. It's only going to further hurt our economy as we move forward.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up this piece of the taxation, right? We've heard so much rhetoric about how it's only going to be the wealthy and large corporations, but there's simply too much spending for that to actually be the case, and still not all of it is paid for, right? And so there's, without question, folks, the middle class, even lower income folks, are going to face higher taxes. Can you unpack that for us a little bit, as far as, you know, they said some of the programs are going to end in 5 years or 8 years, so they're not sort of fully accounted for in the total cost of the budget. What are we actually looking at here as far as, you know, who the taxes are going to hit? You touched on that, and then what the actual cost of this might be and how we reconcile those two.
No, they're going to hit everyone, and the idea that they're going to sunset these programs is ridiculous. Remember, it was President Reagan who said the closest thing to eternal life on earth is a government program. So we know that these, once they get put into law, they're very difficult to unwind and roll back. It's like, you know, and same with taxes. You know, the old, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary tax when it comes to. So that's why we got to stop it on the front end and keep talking about doing the great work you guys are doing. We need to continue that. I think the American people are waking up. I think and they're talking to their members of Congress as they're supposed to. And some of these Democrats in marginal seats are thinking like, maybe I shouldn't vote for all this 3.5 trillion on top of 1.2 trillion. We're in that approximately 5 trillion package. Very little of its actual infrastructure. So that's what's happening. Let's just hope that they can't get the votes, and they have to just fund the government, move forward, and not have this huge tax increase and huge spending increase that they're proposing and talking about now.
Well, yeah, and I, was also beauty of this job is I get to go out and talk to all these folks. Talking to Luis here last night here in Franklin County at a gathering, a political dinner last night, and about the infrastructure. And he represents Latino Conservative Coalition. And I said, how do those folks feel about this? How do your constituency, Luis, feel about this stuff? And the taxes are the big concern, right? Small business owners, folks who are immigrating to the country and working to build up their businesses, or just coming out of the lockdowns that the government put into place. When you think about folks like Luis, what are some of the ways that, what do folks need to hear? What do your colleagues need to hear in Washington to help understand the stories that Luis and Phil and others are bringing to the table here.
I think they need to talk to business owners. Go out and talk to the guy or lady out there who is running a small business or maybe running a mid-sized business, whatever size business, and all the things they have to deal with to make a profit, and all the families who are depending on them. They need to talk to them. I mean, I get many times I'll have some conservative walk up to me and say, thanks for fighting for us. I said, all I do is argue with liberals. You guys you have to deal with all the government that liberals and the left throw on you, all the regulations. And think about it right now. First, they lock down your business. They're paying people not to work. Every single employer I talk to says, I can't find employees. I was driving through Minneapolis. We were up in Wisconsin. We flew back out of Minneapolis back to DC on Monday morning. On Sunday night, we're driving to the hotel where we're staying. And I see in Minneapolis it's like a restaurant, a taco, Mexican restaurant, and big on the window was $15 an hour. I mean, you can't find people to work, even paying at a restaurant making tacos, $15 an hour. So it's what employers have to deal with. I think that's the key. Like I said, the Democrats' plan: lock down the economy, spend like crazy, pay people not to work. Tell people they can't be evicted and then they don't pay the rent. And then for everyone who is paying the rent, who is working hard, who is following the rules, they're going to raise your taxes. It makes no sense. And I think Democrats need to just hear from constituents in their district saying, this is how crazy your plan is.
Well, we're certainly doing our part, Congressman. Americans for Prosperity activists have sent in almost 2 million letters to elected officials, more than 170,000 phone calls. So we're certainly doing our part. I want to zoom out a little bit. You talked about some pretty fundamental principles of the American idea, right? If you work hard, then the circumstances of your birth don't determine the circumstances of your life. And government too often presents a barrier. This $3.5 trillion package, in many ways, is almost an attempt to turn us a little bit more into Europe, right? With high taxes, a lot of regulation on energy and labor and healthcare and all these things. I mean, what do you see as sort of the potential transformational effect of all this spending, all these social welfare programs, and the entitlements? What's really at stake here as far as the way our country is able to function and facilitate the American dream?
Yeah, I think you're accurate, but I think it's even worse. It's not just trying to turn us into a little more like European countries. It's like full-fledged socialism where the hard left wants to take us. And they're gonna ruin this amazing experiment in liberty we call America, where great things happen, where you can chase down your goals and dreams, and you can, make good things happen for yourself, your family, your community. They're gonna ruin that if they continue to spend like this. They continue to infringe on our First Amendment rights. That's what's really at stake. It's about freedom. It's about free markets. And you hear about some of these proposals. The Treasury Department wants to, for any bank account over $600, they want banks and lending institutions and credit unions to provide data on all those customers' accounts so the IRS can monitor. What is that? So that is my concern. It's the encroach on freedom, on free markets, and on our free enterprise system. And we got to defend it. We got to do it in an articulate and compelling way. I think the American people, as I said a couple of times now, I think they're waking up. If you just step back for a second in a broader sense, tell me one thing that's went well for that they've done right in the Biden administration and a Democrat-controlled Senate and House of Representatives. I mean, we went from energy independence to the president of the United States actually begging OPEC to increase production, all in 9 months. We went from a secure border to absolute chaos on the border. Month after March was the highest month on record for illegal crossings until April. April was the highest month until May. May was the highest month until June. June was the highest month until July, when 212,000 illegal encounters on our southern border in 1 month. I mean, so we went from relatively stable prices, not relative, real stable prices and rising wages to highest inflation in 40 years. So they've done nothing right. I haven't even got into foreign policy. So again, that's what's at stake here. And I think you're seeing more and more Americans who are unsettled by all this, who are stepping up and saying, no, time out. We got to go back to the principles that we know work for our country.
Well, and on that, so I'm going to be, tomorrow night, I'll be getting together with a group of our Grasstops leaders in the greater Dayton area, Montgomery County, Ohio. We're going to be talking about a lot of this stuff. And a lot of it is, so while I'm seeing some of the most energy and passion I've ever seen in the activist community since like 2009, early Tea Party days, right? When folks were stepping up and saying, wait a minute, the federal government, as you talked about, was spending almost $1 trillion in the Obama administration. seeing those same levels of energy, but also a lot of fatigue, right? Folks have been fighting this fight for coming up on 9-10 months now. What's some words of advice that you have for those folks to keep them engaged, keep them in this, and knowing that they're help them stay on target with what they need to be working on right now alongside us?
We're Americans. We'll get through it. Particularly, I think you mentioned Dayton, Ohio there. I just finished McCullough's book on the Wright brothers, who grew up right there in Dayton. And there was McCullough starts the book. He says, someone once asked Wilbur Wright what it takes to be successful. And his response was, pick out 2 good parents and be born in Ohio. And I think that statement could actually be, pick out 2 good parents and be born in America, where you can have a goal and a dream and you can make it happen in our system, which is based on freedom and respect for rights and the rule of law. So just understand it. It's America. It's the greatest country ever, and it's worth fighting for. We'll get through this. There's an election in less than 14 months. I think the American people are going to throw the Democrats out, put Republicans back in charge of the House of Representatives. So I think that's the positive. We're an amazing country, and we've risen to the challenge every single time there's been some big challenge, some big hurdle, some big obstacle in front of us. We've always been able to deal with it. I think we'll do the same. But it's going to take work. It's going to take effort. That's just how the good Lord made it. But I think we'll be all right.
You mentioned, we've got a couple minutes left here, Congressman. You mentioned that folks in Washington are feeling the pressure. I think they're feeling the pressure because the American people are feeling the cost, right? They're seeing the job postings everywhere. They're seeing, rising prices at the grocery store and the gas station, and they're seeing, employers' inability to, get back to work and get people, get the economy rolling again. And so, what do you feel like as far as why this has stalled a little bit? Do you think that has an impact on why this is stalled and why folks are a little bit reluctant to vote for $5 trillion in spending, or what do you feel like the impact has really been of all these activists taking action?
No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, that's how our system works. I tell folks all the time, particularly the House of Representatives, the founders in their wisdom wanted the House to be the body closest to the American people, closest to we the people. That's why every 2 years, you all get a chance to throw us out of office. That's a good thing. That keeps us honest. That keeps us coming back talking. You're a representative. It's hard to represent people if you don't go talk to them, hear what they're thinking, hear what they're going through, and hear their concerns. That's what's going on right now. And that's exactly how the founders designed the system. Democrats are hearing from their constituents saying, what the heck are you doing? I can't find people to work. The cost of everything has gone up. I mean, when have you ever seen as an example, car dealerships? I've never seen a car dealership where the lot wasn't full with inventory and options for people to buy. Now you go to car dealer, there aren't any cars there. I mean, they're a handful, and the used car sales are unique right now. So it's just like we've seen things that totally unsettled the American people. I think that's definitely having an impact. And I'm hoping there's a few folks still left in the Democrat Party who aren't going to go along with the hard left and do some of the crazy things that they're proposing.
Donovan, any final words as we wrap up here?
Yeah, real quick. Again, Congressman Jordan, really appreciate your time here today.
Thank you.
Quick call to action. We'll have that in the chat. Make sure you're using the hashtag Stop the Spending Spree. And if you get a chance, if you're not, you got a good fighter. Those of you who live in Congressman Jordan's district, you got a good fighter in that. He's out there representing you. But we need to let other folks know to keep up the fight and stay strong in this. Make sure you call the Capitol switchboard at 202-410-2685. But again, Congressman Jordan, thank you. Any final words from you?
No, God bless you guys. Appreciate the good work you're doing and the folks you're talking to all over the country. Keep it up.
Thanks for being on the fight with us.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.